Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast. It's a tense second week of Ramadan with Passover just around the corner, and we're breaking down all the latest security updates. Meantime, influencer Jamie Geller is raising awareness for the less fortunate ahead of Passover. And later, the beloved international actress leaving Hollywood behind to make an Aliyah. During the tense second weekend of Ramadan, there were two terror attempts, one in Jerusalem and the other in Judea. In the Jerusalem attack, a Palestinian attempted to steal the gun of a policeman, and in the Etzion block, a Palestinian driver rammed into three soldiers, injuring one seriously. In both cases, the terrorists were quickly neutralized, and more in this report by Steve Leibovich.
Last night, 3 soldiers wounded, one critically, when a Palestinian terrorist rammed his car into the officers near the village of Beit Umar in the Etzion block. The driver was shot and killed by security forces. The attacker was identified as 23-year-old Mohammed Baradia, an officer in the Palestinian Authority's security services. The wounded soldiers were evacuated to Hadassah Ein Kerem and Shari Tzedek hospitals, with one in serious condition. In Jerusalem, Israeli police shot and killed a terrorist who stole a gun from an officer stationed near the Temple Mount during Ramadan prayers early yesterday morning. The 26-year-old gunman was identified as Mohammed al-Asibi from the Bedouin village of Hura in the Negev. The officers were stationed at the chain gate to the Temple Mount. According to the police, the man lunged at them during a routine search and grabbed the gun. He managed to fire a shot with the officer's gun before being shot dead by other officers during a scuffle. There was no CCTV of the incident, and police are conducting an investigation. Following that incident, the entrance gates to the mosques were closed. No injuries were reported among Israeli forces. Over 100,000 Muslims held prayers on the Temple Mount on the second Friday of Ramadan. Security forces were on alert as some 52,000 Palestinians crossed into Israel. Some 2,300 border police were deployed in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. Police said there had been an uptick in incitement by terror organizations on social media, including efforts to portray a danger to holy sites. Beginning this morning and until after the start of the Passover holiday, a closure has been imposed, preventing Palestinians from entering Israel. Crossings will reopen on Friday in order to allow Palestinians to come to Jerusalem for Friday prayers at Temple Mount mosques.
And joining us now with more on the security situation is CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General Reserves Amir Avivi. Amir, what were the circumstances of the car ramming in the Etzion block? Why were the soldiers exposed, actually?
Well, I don't know exactly the circumstances, but, when the soldiers operate, they need to be very alert for the surroundings and make sure that while some soldiers are concentrated on what is happening close to them, others look further away to make sure there is no danger. I believe that the Army will check and debrief and see exactly what happened in this event and try to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that the lessons are learned.
Also in Jerusalem, an Israeli Arab who just finished medical school was shot dead by police after trying to grab an officer's gun. There was apparently no CCTV or body camera. It seems like an unusual case, does it not?
Yes, certainly. We're talking about Israeli Arab, a Bedouin from a village in the Negev called Hura. We have seen in the last 2 decades a big change in the Bedouins in the Negev, more and more Islamism, more and more connection to extremist Islamism. And unfortunately, although we're talking about somebody who has studied to be a doctor, it seems that this ideology is infiltrated. This person tried to take the gun from the policeman and achieved, and even shot at 2 soldiers that were standing nearby. Luckily, he missed, and the soldiers reacted and neutralized him.
Amir, we just completed the second Friday of Ramadan, and a closure is going into effect for the Passover holiday really soon. What are you expecting for this coming week?
Well, I think that tensions are very high, and not only in East Jerusalem, but also in the region of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and also in the north. In the north, we see the IDF continuing to operate and be very, very alert. We think that Hezbollah might try another attack. So the forces of the IDF are in a high readiness on the northern border. And we are hoping that what we saw in the first 2 weeks that were, calmer than events we saw in the past few years will continue like that, and that the people of Israel will be able to enjoy the holiday of Passover. But certainly there is a lot of tension, and the police and the IDF are bringing more and more forces to secure the borders and secure the region.
Definitely. Let's hope for the most quiet holiday. I understand that you took part in a rally to protest against refusal to serve in the army. In your view, why is this protest necessary?
Well, I think that the most important thing the Jewish people have today is the Israeli Defense Forces. Every one of us, it doesn't matter what is our political affiliation and what we think about a certain political issue, should understand that the Israeli Defense Forces need to be completely out of any political discussion. This is the army of the people. It defends the state of Israel. The army defends the whole Jewish people all around the world. And when we come to the army, we serve together, we fight together, we endanger our life together, and we don't ask what are political views of people. Unfortunately, we're seeing now, talking about the judicial reform, some people who choose to politicize the army, to threat that they won't serve if a certain political view will overcome or certain government policy. This is very, very dangerous. It's hurting the army, it's endangering us. It's hurting our deterrence, looking at our enemies who are looking what's happening in the army, and they feel that we are weaker and we might experience an attack or a war because of that. And we also have to remember that now we have this government, in the future maybe another one, and we cannot have each time a government wants to push a policy, somebody in the army saying, if this policy will be pushed, I'm not going to serve. This is devastating for the state of Israel, and we reminded people, that we should leave the army outside and swear our alliance, our oath. Remember our oath that we swore to the army and to the state of Israel that we'll always keep Israel safe and keep the military above politics.
Amir, definitely refreshing to hear more opinions. Have a happy and quiet Passover ahead. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy Passover.
The coalition and opposition are continuing talks aimed at reaching a compromise on the central issue of judicial reform. This as both pro and anti-reform supporters held mass demonstrations to advocate for their views. ILTV Steve Leibovitz reports.
With much at stake, the two sides are continuing talks at the president's residence. The atmosphere has reportedly been tense, with Justice Minister Levine and National Unity negotiator Hili Troper at first publicly clashing and later agreeing to lower the tone. The two sides met for negotiations at the president's residence in Jerusalem on Friday, with talks continuing until the Passover holiday begins on Wednesday night. President Herzog has been urging the coalition and opposition to give the negotiations a real chance to succeed, despite the lack of trust and animosity between the two sides. Anti-overhaul protesters renewed nationwide rallies last night for the first time since the pause in government legislation. An estimated crowd of some 200,000 were in Tel Aviv, with tens of thousands more in protests around the country. The Ayalon highway was again blocked, and 19 protesters were arrested when police used force to reopen the road. And there were protests this weekend in favor of judicial reforms and calling for a halt in the compromise negotiations underway at the president's residence. Following its large Jerusalem rally last Monday, on Thursday night a major pro-judicial reform rally was held in Tel Aviv. Waving Israeli and Likud flags, some 20,000 protesters marched in support of the government's judicial reform plans. It was dubbed the March of Freedom, with the aim of being freed from the restraints of the High Court, and proclaimed that the people had chosen judicial reform. Some pro-government demonstrators then marched to Tel Aviv's Ayalon highway, blocking traffic, employing a tactic used by anti-overhaul protesters over the past 3 months. Police eventually cleared the highway, but not before 10 people were detained.
Strains in U.S.-Israel relations appear to be smoothing out. At least that's the tone of messages from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Foreign Minister Eli Cohen after the two top diplomats spoke over the weekend. Cohen tweeted this: "Yesterday evening, I spoke with my friend, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. We talked about the expansion of the Abraham Accords, the visa exemption for Israelis, and the judicial reform. Our relationship with the United States is one of the pillars of our foreign policy." Blinken responded with a tweet of his own. "Spoke with Israeli Foreign Minister Cohen today. We discussed the importance of our bilateral relationship, efforts to advance normalization, and our commitment to preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. The United States remains committed to a two-state solution." Meanwhile, Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley weighed in on the recent critical comments made by President Joe Biden. The ardent pro-Israel former UN ambassador said, "It's outrageous for Joe Biden to lecture Israel on a matter that is entirely their domestic concern. We would never want the Israeli government to push America on issues surrounding our Supreme Court, and they wouldn't do it. We should let Israelis decide this themselves." And joining us now to further discuss the latest diplomatic issues is Dan Dyker, president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Dan, Foreign Minister Cohen and U.S. Secretary of State Blinken spoke, and both issues polite and even conciliatory statements. Is the recent spat set off by President Biden's critical comments now behind us?
Well, I'd like to think so. It's clear that the United States and Israel are the best of friends and allies. And clearly the tone, the intensity of developments here and in the United States has reached fever pitch. And I think both the United States and Israel want to walk back a little bit the intensity of the tone and the tensions between the sides. So it's clear that the WhatsApp messages that we've read by Foreign Minister Cohen and Foreign Minister Blinken, my former classmate at Harvard College, by the way, really set, I think, is really a reset of what have always been friendly relationships. But clearly there have been ups and downs on the political level. But I think both sides very much want to return to the smoother tones that have characterized the relationship over the last 42 years between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
What more can you tell us about your former friend from Harvard?
I can tell you that Foreign Minister Blinken, Tony Blinken, as I knew him in college, is a consummate gentleman and someone that you would have known would go into diplomacy. His father Donald was an esteemed American diplomat, the ambassador to Hungary, and I'm unsurprised that Tony's done as well as he has in American diplomacy.
That's interesting. Now, Dan, do you expect that the U.S. will use what's been termed as tough love between friends to get Israel to follow the U.S. lead on key issues?
Well, the United States and Israel are a little bit at loggerheads over a couple of key tension points. One, of course, is the JCPOA, which Israel has always opposed as a very dangerous, the Iranian nuclear deal, a very dangerous deal for Israel. And the United States, of course, had pushed that. And the second tension point is really the Palestinian issue. You know, the Palestinian Authority has declined to stop paying terrorists, incentivizing young boys and girls and civilians in the Palestinian Authority to attack Israelis, and have paid them annuities for some years, involved in some of the worst incitement to murder Israelis that we have seen over the last 3 decades, and continue to steal land in Area C and build illegally in Area C and take Israel to international courts like the ICC, the ICJ. And Israel, in my estimation, would be much more reassured if their American ally would call out the Palestinian Authority and enforce the Taylor Force Act that the Congress passed a few years ago following the Palestinian terror murder of former a former American citizen, Taylor Force.
Yes, now Republican presidential candidate just to the other side, Nikki Haley, blasted Biden and said it's an internal Israel matter and mind your own business kind of thing. Is that the view of many of the Republican Party?
I don't know. I mean, Israel stays out of domestic debate in the United States. Nikki Haley, former UN ambassador, has always been a very, very dear friend of the state of Israel. But Israel has dear friends on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats both. And I think that Israel would do well to reassert its legal rights in its conflict with the Palestinians, as well as its extraordinary advancement on the issues of normalization with the Abraham Accords and the increase in the circle of peace. I'll just note to you, we're actually, and I think all of Israel is very, very pleased and optimistic about the future for the Abraham and Normalization Accords, and really hope that the United States will keep pace with what's happening with our Middle Eastern African partners.
That's really optimistic, Dan. It was a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much.
An Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officer was killed in an alleged Israeli airstrike on Damascus shortly after midnight Friday. This is part of a third airstrike in Syria in 4 days attributed to Israel. Syrian Defense Ministry reporting overnight that Israel attacked the Homs area in the country's west. According to the Syrian army, 5 Syrian army personnel were wounded in the attack carried out from the northeast of Beirut towards positions in the area of the city of Homs and its suburbs. This is the third attack attributed to Israel in Syria in 4 days. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said explosions were heard at a few sites, including the Syrian military airport at Al-Daba near Homs, and a fire broke out at the scientific research facility in another area. The organization said the strikes targeted several Syrian military positions and Iranian-backed militia. Also over the weekend, the senior Iranian officer Milad Haidari killed in an attack attributed to Israel in Syria on the night between Thursday and Friday is a member of the intelligence apparatus of Iran's Revolutionary Guards dealing with directing terrorist attacks against Israel. Haidari was in Syria, where he was captured with members of pro-Iranian militias. Iran is now vowing to revenge the attack on Haidari, as a report by the Iranian Tasnim news agency stated that the Zionist regime will undoubtedly get a response to this crime. Yesterday morning, in a statement on its behalf, the Iranian Foreign Ministry claimed that the Israeli attacks in Damascus are its attempt to divert attention from the internal crisis in Israel. And for all the soccer fans out there, Indonesian football players and fans reacted with tears and outrage after the country was stripped of hosting rights for the Under-20 World Cup only 8 weeks before the start of the tournament amid political turmoil over Israel's participation, leaving Indonesian footballers at risk of further sanctions, and the destination now, South America. Argentina has submitted a formal bid to host this year's Under-20 World Cup in place of Indonesia, which was stripped its rights to stage the tournament, FIFA President Gianni Infantino said at the end of the week. Argentina was the only country to submit a formal offer, and the FIFA Bureau will decide whether to accept the proposal any day now, with the tournament scheduled to start on May 20.
Todos conocemos el fútbol en Argentina y que seguramente puede albergar una competición de ese nivel. Sub-20, a mí personalmente, después del Mundial, para un Mundial es algo excepcional, es la competición que más me gusta, una competición muy, muy linda.
Argentina's U20 national team was not scheduled to play in the tournament after failing to qualify through the South American route back in January. In the event the South American country was to take over hosting responsibilities, Argentina could now qualify for the tournament as the host nation. President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, said he was disappointed and sad after the World Soccer governing body FIFA stripped his country of its rights to host the Under-20 World Cup, but said the decision must be respected. Indonesia was stripped of its opportunity to host the Under-20 FIFA World Cup 2023 last week after local officials said they would not allow Israelis to stay in their cities amid protests over Israel's participation in the tournament. The loss of the hosting rights will be a big setback in Indonesia, where football has a massive following despite the lack of international success since qualifying for the 1938 World Cup as the Dutch East Indies. We are now with influencer Jamie Geller, who visited the USIsrael Shulamit headquarters in Jerusalem to make delicious Passover treats with the kids while raising awareness for the less fortunate. Passover is just around the corner, and influencer Jamie Geller has visited the USIsrael Shulamit Children's Center for Passover treating. This for creating videos spreading awareness about feeding these hungry families during the holidays while visiting the place.
Hi everyone, it's Jamie Geller. I'm here at the USIsrael Shulamit Children's Center in Jerusalem.
This year, the USIsrael Shulamit organization has already received over 55,000 requests for food baskets. Through donations and several partners, they're able to make this happen for the poor families. USIsrael Shulamit is a Jewish charity whose main mission is to feed the poor and hungry families in Israel and to provide resources to children under the poverty line. The organization is distributing 10,000 food baskets and hundreds of food vouchers every week to the less fortunate across 92 cities in Israel. A variety of food is provided in each basket, including items such as chicken, fish, fresh fruits, vegetables, non-perishables, dairy products, and more. On holidays such as Passover, they would additionally provide matzah to make sure every family can celebrate the high holiday as they please. And Jamie joined them this time to make some chocolate matzo bark. USIsrael Shulamit is also focusing on their children's centers throughout Israel. With over 1/3 of Israeli children under the poverty line, these centers are created to provide children with all of the materials they need to flourish. In these centers, the children are receiving a daily hot lunch, tutoring, different forms of therapy, access to a computer lab, gym and library, enrichment activities, games, trips, and holiday parties. Additionally, they provide each child with a new backpack, school supplies, and winter coat, heaters, clothing, and footwear. And the fun with Jamie never stops.
The girls have beautifully spread the melted chocolate everywhere. Now they're going to start to decorate. I wanted to show you what the finished product looks like. You can just put this in the fridge and it sets up beautifully. And then to make it bark and to make it a fun snack, you literally just snap it with your hands. We want like these rustic kind of big pieces. This is a great activity. Pesach is a time of year where everything's so much more expensive. Please help everyone have a happy kosher Pesach by donating to USIsrael Shulamit. We will send 55,000 boxes of vouchers filled with chicken and fish and chocolate and matzah and grape juice for kiddush and all the things that you would want and hope so that nobody goes hungry this Pesach.
USIsrael Shulamit is doing their best to feed Israel's hungry children and families. This Passover, we're thankful for all that we have. Incredible work. Now, American actress Diane Neal has left Hollywood behind and moved to Israel. Neal, best known for her role as New York Assistant District Attorney Casey Novak in the television series Law and Order Special Victims Unit, made Aliyah through the Nefesh B'Nefesh organization, the Aliyah and Integration Ministry, and the Jewish Agency. In recent years, Neal herself has disappeared from the screen, apparently as a result of a car accident in which she injured her spine. According to her, when running for Congress in 2018, the injury caused her to put her acting career on hold. The actress also portrayed Coast Guard Investigative Service Special Agent Abigail Boren in the NCIS franchise, as well as attorney Allison Holt on Suits. Neal began her Aliyah process several months ago, which culminated in her receiving her Israeli identity card. Welcome, Diane. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 11 degrees Celsius or 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we will see the sunshine as the skies will be clear alongside steady top temperatures, seeing highs of about 31 degrees Celsius or 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, And do not forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all of the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Amit Harari. Have a great day. Thank you so much for watching.